The Supreme Court just dropped a 9-0 shockwave that changes the game for every gun owner in America, and almost nobody is talking about the real danger. This unanimous decision just flipped the script on how the government can use the banking system and insurance companies to quietly crush your Second Amendment rights. This isn't some distant legal theory, because it could hit your wallet, your privacy, and your ability to buy gear tomorrow. If you think your rights are safe just because you haven't broken the law, you are missing the most dangerous part of this story. We are talking about the massive ruling in NRA v. Vulo, decided in May 2024, where every single justice on the bench agreed the government went too far. This case proves that the state is finding new ways to come after you without ever having to step foot on your property or look at your permit. I am going to break down exactly what happened, why the media is totally ignoring the 9-0 vote count, and how this affects your ability to carry. You need to understand this right now because the tactics used in this case are already being copied by politicians across the country to bypass the Constitution. This is about more than just one organization. It is about whether the government can force private companies to treat you like a second-class citizen. If you want to stay ahead of these fast-moving legal changes and get the truth without the political spin, hit that subscribe button right now. The story starts in New York, where a top state official named Maria Vulo decided to use her power to target people who support the Second Amendment. She didn't pass a new law or send the police to anyone's door because she knew the courts might stop her if she was that direct. Instead, she went to the banks and the insurance companies that work with gun rights groups and told them they should stop doing business with gun promotion organizations. She didn't just suggest it. She used the weight of the government to suggest that these companies were taking a huge reputational risk by helping gun owners. This is what lawyers call a coercive move, which is just a fancy way of saying the government was bullying private companies into doing their dirty work. When the case finally reached the Supreme Court, the justices had to decide if a government official can use their office to pressure companies to blackball people based on their views. In a rare 9-0 move, the court said absolutely not, ruling that this kind of behavior violates the First Amendment. While this is technically a speech case, it is a massive win for the Second Amendment because it stops the government from cutting off your access to the financial world. If the state could tell your bank that your hobby is a risk, they could effectively end your rights without ever touching a single gun law. Justice Sonia Sotomayor wrote the opinion, and she made it clear that the government cannot use backdoor tactics to silence or punish people they don't like. It is important to notice that even the most liberal justices on the court signed onto this opinion without any hesitation. This tells you that the government's behavior was so out of line that it united a deeply divided court in a way we rarely see today. But don't let the 9-0 win fool you into thinking the fight is over, because the tactics haven't stopped, they've just gone underground. This ruling is a shield, but you have to know how to use it when your local or state government starts putting the squeeze on your favorite shops or ranges. What do you think about the government using banks to target your rights? Let me know in the comments if you've seen businesses in your area start to distance themselves from the gun community recently. Now that we've seen the basic setup, we need to look at why the headline you saw on the news is only giving you half of the truth. Most news outlets framed this as a simple free speech case about a big lobbying group, but that is a dangerous way to look at it. The real issue is the financial deplatforming of law-abiding citizens who just want to exercise their constitutional rights. Deplatforming is when a company kicks you off their service, but here it was the government pulling the strings from the shadows. Think of it like a landlord who wants to kick out a tenant but doesn't have a legal reason to do it. Instead of going to court, the landlord calls the electric company and the water company and tells them to shut off the power to that specific apartment. The landlord didn't technically evict the person, but they made it impossible for that person to live there anymore. That is exactly what New York was trying to do to gun owners by pressuring the insurance companies that provide carry insurance and liability coverage. If you can't get insurance and you can't get a bank account, your right to keep and bear arms becomes much harder to exercise in the real world. This Supreme Court ruling says the government can't act like that shady landlord anymore, but the threat is still very real for the average person. Here is what this means for you, your family, and your daily life as a responsible gun owner. If you are a first-time gun owner, you might not realize how much you rely on the financial plumbing of the country to stay legal and safe. Every time you buy a box of ammo with a credit card or pay for a safety course, you are using a system that the government wants to monitor or control. This ruling is a warning shot to state officials who want to pressure your bank to flag those purchases as suspicious or dangerous. It means that your purely legal activities shouldn't be used as a reason for a bank to close your account or deny you a loan. For those of you who carry every day, this case is even more personal because it involves the very insurance that protects your family if you ever have to use your tool. Many states have tried to ban self-defense insurance, claiming it encourages violence, which is like saying car insurance encourages people to crash their cars. The Vulo case confirms that the state can't just bully these insurance providers out of existence because they don't like the product. It gives you a layer of protection against politicians who want to make it too expensive or too difficult for you to be a responsible insured gun owner. This is about making sure that the cost of admission for your rights isn't hiked up by backroom deals between bureaucrats and CEOs. Let's look at a realistic scenario that could happen to any of us during a simple weekend trip to a local gun show or a training facility. Imagine you go to buy a new holster or some spare parts, and your credit card gets declined for no apparent reason, even though you have plenty of credit. Later, you find out your bank has decided to stop processing transactions for firearms-related businesses because they got a suggestion from a state regulator. Before this 9-0 ruling, that bank could just say it was a private business decision and you would have almost no way to fight back. Now, if there is evidence that the government was the one leaning on the bank, you have a massive Supreme Court precedent to back you up. Another scenario involves the simple act of renting a space for a safety class or a community meeting about the Second Amendment. If the local government tells the property owner that they might lose their business license if they keep hosting those kinds of people, that is exactly what the court just outlawed. You might not even know it's happening until the owner calls you up and says the space is suddenly unavailable for your group. This ruling makes it much harder for the government to hide its tracks when it tries to censor your ability to gather and learn. It protects the small business owners who want to serve the gun community but are afraid of getting canceled by the state. Think about a traffic stop where an officer sees your permit and starts asking questions about where you work or where you do your banking. It might seem like small talk, but in some states they are looking for any connection they can use to label you a risk in their system. This 9-0 decision reinforces the idea that your legal status as a gun owner cannot be treated like a scarlet letter that makes you toxic to society. It tells every government employee from the governor down to the local inspector that they have to stay in their lane. The part that should worry you is that many states are already trying to find loopholes to get around this decision as we speak. This is where the bigger issue starts to show its teeth, and it's a trap that many people are going to fall into if they aren't careful. We are seeing a new wave of social credit scores being applied to gun owners through private companies that are secretly working with the government. Stay with me here because this is where the next big fight is going to happen in the lower courts. If you want to know how to spot these traps before they catch you, make sure you stay subscribed so you don't miss our deep dive into the new state laws coming this fall. You need to be part of an informed community that refuses to be pushed into the shadows by these underhanded tactics. Now we need to address the future consequences of this 9-0 ruling and why the next few months are going to be a legal battlefield. While the Supreme Court gave us a clear win, they sent the case back down to the lower courts to finish the job against the specific officials in New York. This means we are going to see a lot of discovery, which is the legal process of digging up internal emails and memos from the government. We are likely going to see exactly how these officials talked about gun owners behind closed doors when they thought nobody was watching. These documents will be a goldmine for future lawsuits in other states that are trying the same dirty tricks right now. Lower courts in places like California and Illinois are now forced to look at their own state's actions through the lens of this 9-0 decision. For years, these courts have been looking for any excuse to uphold gun restrictions, but a unanimous Supreme Court ruling is very hard for them to ignore. We are going to see a wave of new lawsuits targeting state agencies that have been pressuring banks to de-risk from the firearms industry. This is where the next fight starts, and it's going to be a long, slow grind through the federal court system. You have to be prepared for a marathon, not a sprint, as we claw back the ground that was lost over the last decade. The state governments are already reacting to this by being more careful with their language, but their goals haven't changed one bit. Instead of suggesting that banks drop gun owners, they might start using environmental or social governance rules to achieve the same thing. This is a game of legal whack-a-mole where the government keeps trying to find new ways to pressure the companies you rely on every day. But the Vulo ruling gives us a hammer to use every time they stick their heads up with a new coercive policy. It changes the math for these bureaucrats because they can now be held personally liable for violating your constitutional rights. Think of it like a bully on a playground who has been stealing lunch money by convincing other kids to give it to him so he doesn't have to hit them. The principal just stepped in and said that convincing someone through fear is the same thing as stealing, and now the bully is in big trouble. The Supreme Court just acted as the principal for the entire country, and they told the state bullies that the game is over. But a bully doesn't just stop being a bully overnight, they just look for a place where the principal isn't watching as closely. That is why we have to keep our eyes on the local level, where these policies often start before they go national. There are also huge implications for the First Amendment that go hand in hand with your right to keep and bear arms. If the government can't pressure a bank to drop you for your views, they also can't pressure a social media site to shadow ban your gun safety videos. This ruling is a double-barreled win because it protects your right to speak about your tools and your right to actually own them. It creates a zone of privacy around your legal activities that the government is not allowed to invade through the back door. This is a massive shift in the legal landscape that will benefit every American. regardless of their stance on guns, because it protects everyone from government overreach. However, we need to correct some of the bad takes and myths that are already floating around the internet about this 9-0 decision. The first myth is that this ruling means a private bank can never choose to close a gun shop's account or stop doing business with a manufacturer. That is not true. A private company can still make its own choices, but the key is that they have to do it on their own, not because the government told them to. If a bank decides on its own that it doesn't like guns, that is a business choice, but if a state official encourages them with a wink and a nod, that is a constitutional violation. This distinction is vital because it helps us know exactly who to hold accountable when things go wrong. The second myth is that this ruling only applies to big organizations like the NRA and doesn't protect the little guy or the individual gun owner. In reality, the Supreme Court's logic applies to any individual whose rights are being targeted by a government official using their power to pressure third parties. If a local mayor pressures a landlord to kick out a gun store, that store owner can use this 9-0 ruling to sue the mayor directly. The principle of the law doesn't care if you are a multi-million-dollar group or a guy running a small shop out of his garage. The law protects the right itself, and that right belongs to you as an individual citizen. The third myth you'll hear is that the 9-0 vote count doesn't matter as much as a 5-4 or 6-3 ruling on a real gun case like Bruin. People will say that since this was a speech case, it doesn't strengthen the Second Amendment in a meaningful way, but they couldn't be more wrong. A 9-0 ruling is a precedent of steel that is almost impossible for future courts to overturn or ignore for a very long time. It shows that the core principles of our freedom are still respected by everyone on the bench, even when they disagree on the details. This gives us a solid foundation to build on as we challenge other laws that try to make it too difficult to be a gun owner. Let's talk about why this matters when you are crossing a state line or moving to a new area with your collection. You might be worried that the new state's reputation for being anti-gun will make it impossible for you to find a local bank or an insurance agent who will work with you. This ruling helps ensure that the state government can't legally make it a requirement for businesses to shun you just because you are a gun owner. It provides a level of consistency across the country that we haven't had in a long time, making it safer for you to move and travel without losing your financial life. It keeps the United States by preventing states from creating financial iron curtains against certain types of citizens. Consider the impact on your children or the next generation of gun owners who are growing up in a world that is increasingly digital and connected. They are going to rely on digital payments, online storage, and social platforms for everything they do, including their education on firearm safety. If the government can't pressure these platforms to filter out Second Amendment content, then the next generation will still have access to the truth. This ruling is an investment in the future of our rights because it keeps the channels of communication and commerce open for everyone. It ensures that the market of ideas stays free from government-sponsored interference and bullying. What if you are a parent who just wants to keep a firearm in the home for protection, but you're afraid your insurance company will drop your homeowner's policy if they find out? Before this case, a state regulator could have quietly told all the insurance companies in the state to start asking about gun ownership and to hike rates for those who say yes. Now, that kind of coordinated soft ban is much more difficult to pull off without getting slapped with a major federal lawsuit. It means you can make the best safety choices for your family without having to worry about a secret tax being imposed by a bureaucrat in a distant capital. Your home should be your castle, and the government shouldn't be able to tax the drawbridge out of existence. Think of it like a game of chess, where the government has been trying to take your pieces by changing the rules of the game whenever it's your turn. The Supreme Court just stepped in and said that the rules are fixed, and they apply to both players equally, no matter who is winning. This gives you the chance to play the game on a level field, where your choices and your rights actually matter. It doesn't mean you will win every fight, but it means the fight will be fair and transparent, which is all we can ask for in a free society. The 9-0 shockwave is the sound of the board being reset to a position of fairness for all gun owners. Here is the part that most people still don't see. This ruling is going to lead to a massive change in how administrative agencies operate. These are the groups like the ATF or state departments of financial services that often make up their own rules without a vote from the people. For a long time, these agencies have acted like they are above the law, using guidance documents to change how businesses act. The Vulo decision puts a massive leash on these agencies, telling them that their guidance cannot be used to violate the constitutional rights of the citizens they are supposed to serve. This is a major win for the separation of powers, which is just a way of saying that one branch of government can't have all the power. This is where the next fight starts, and it's going to be about transparency and holding these individuals accountable for their secret meetings and phone calls. We need to be looking for the paper trail that shows when a politician is trying to lean on a company to hurt a specific group of people. If we can find that trail, we can stop the overreach before it becomes a permanent policy that ruins lives. This is why staying informed and watching these cases is so important. You are the first line of defense for your own rights. Knowledge is the most powerful tool you have. And this 9-0 ruling just gave you a whole new toolbox to work with. We've covered a lot of ground today, and I want to make sure you have the 3 most important takeaways to share with your friends at the range. First, the Supreme Court ruled 9-0 that the government cannot bully banks or insurance companies into blacklisting people for their views on the Second Amendment. Second, this is a massive win because it stops the backdoor ban on guns through the financial system, which was becoming a major threat in states like New York. Third, while this is a great victory, the fight is moving to the lower courts, where we have to make sure this ruling is actually enforced on the ground. This is a turning point in our history, and we have to make sure we don't let the momentum slip away. This matters in the long term because it sets a standard for how all of our rights will be protected in the digital age. If the government could do this to gun owners today, they could do it to any other group they disagree with tomorrow. By standing up for the Second Amendment, the court actually stood up for every single American's right to be free from government bullying. This is about the kind of country we want to leave for our kids, a country where the law is clear and the government is limited. You should feel more confident and more alert today, knowing that even a divided court can agree on this fundamental truth. We are part of a movement of people who refuse to stay uninformed while our rights are being discussed in high-rise offices and marble courthouses. Your safety, your family, and your freedom are worth the effort it takes to understand these complex legal battles. If you want to keep getting these updates and stay one step ahead of the people who want to limit your rights, make sure to subscribe and hit that bell. We are building a community of responsible, informed citizens who know the law and know how to defend it. Drop a comment below and tell me if this 9-0 ruling makes you feel more optimistic about the future of the Supreme Court. As we move forward, remember that a right is only as strong as your willingness to understand it and stand up for it in your daily life. The Supreme Court gave us a powerful tool with this 9-0 decision, but it is up to us to make sure it doesn't just sit on a shelf gathering dust. Talk to your local shop owners, stay involved in your local politics, and keep watching the courts as they apply this new standard. We are seeing a shift back toward the original meaning of the Constitution, and that is something we should all be proud of. Stay safe, stay informed, and I will see you in the next one as we continue to track the fight for our freedom. This unanimous decision is a reminder that some things are still sacred in our legal system, even in these crazy and divided times. It proves that the checks and balances our founders put in place are still working, even if they sometimes move slower than we would like. You are now better prepared than 99% of the population to explain why this case matters and what it means for the future of the Second Amendment. Take that knowledge and use it to be a leader in your community and a protector of the rights we all hold dear. The 9-0 shockwave is still echoing out across the country, and we are going to be here to see where it lands next. In the final closing, I want to thank you for taking the time to really dive into the meat of this ruling instead of just reading a headline and moving on. It shows that you are the kind of person who cares about the details and the truth, which is exactly what our country needs right now. We are going to keep digging into these cases and bringing you the facts so you can make the best decisions for yourself and your loved ones. Don't forget to like this video if it helped clear up the confusion around the Vulo case and the 9-0 vote count. Keep your head up, your powder dry, and your eyes on the court, because the journey for justice is just getting started.